Two thugs boarded the bus, walked up to an elderly black man, and started insulting him, ordering him to give up his seat. However, the old man was not afraid and suddenly slapped one of the thugs in the face, enraging them. They were about to attack him, but just then, a bearded man appeared. He intervened, stopping their actions and sternly criticizing their disrespectful attitude. Afterward, the bearded man calmly sat down in the seat ahead, but his warnings only made the thugs even angrier. They thought the old man was weak and easy to overpower, so they boldly provoked him, challenging him to a fight. However, what stunned them was that he quickly took down both of them with just a few punches. This man's name is Frank, a Vietnam War veteran. Frank never imagined that his life could take such an unexpected turn. After returning from the battlefield in Vietnam, Frank's life seemed to come to a standstill for decades. But now, everything is on the verge of changing in a spectacular way. Frank was raised in a humble family and spent his childhood working alongside his parents on a small farm in California. Despite their modest life, he never felt discouraged. On the contrary, it was this simplicity that taught him to appreciate the simple pleasures of life, such as his genuine love for Lindsay, the girl he always dreamed would become his wife. The young couple's beautiful plans were interrupted by the outbreak of the Vietnam War. Frank promised Lindsay that he would return as soon as possible, but the war lasted longer than anyone had anticipated. For 7 years in a foreign land, Frank faced harsh trials, even being captured and held as a prisoner of war. He endured brutal torture and interrogations, but with extraordinary resilience, Frank survived and was eventually freed. Ultimately, he was forced to return home after suffering a serious injury, carrying with him the haunting memories of the war. After being discharged from the hospital, Frank immediately went to his girlfriend's house, hoping for a reunion. However, he was shocked to find that Lindsay had gotten married. Saddened, Frank decided to pour all his energy into building a career. He applied to the police academy, believing that his combat experience would give him a chance. However, Frank was rejected due to his severe injuries. Undeterred, he continued to search for other opportunities. Due to his lack of higher education, Frank was continuously rejected everywhere he applied. Phrases like, "Sorry, the position has already been filled," became so familiar that he had no hope left. Eventually, with no other options, Frank had no choice but to fend for himself. Little did anyone know, a war veteran like him ended up making a living by selling sausages on the street for a long 40 years. However, fate suddenly took a different turn. One day, while riding his usual bus route, Frank witnessed an unexpected event. Two bald men got on the bus and started harassing a black passenger. The two men were about to strike the old man, but just then, Frank stepped in. At first, he only intended to warn them and said he wouldn't take action, but the two thugs seemed to be inviting a fight. Unable to tolerate their arrogance, Frank took action and taught them a lesson. The other passengers on the bus applauded his brave act. What Frank didn't expect was that the entire incident had been recorded by a passenger and quickly went viral online. The video turned him into an internet sensation, and Frank, the man who had lived in silence for many years, was now affectionately referred to as the cool guy. His image appeared everywhere, from graffiti walls to t-shirt designs. The police took him home with a friendly attitude, as if they were old friends. Reporters scrambled to secure an interview with the social media star who was making waves. But what moved Frank the most was the look of pride in his mother's eyes. Frank's brief moment of joy was cut short when his mother passed away, leaving him a large house and her beloved dog as her final gift. Now, the only family Frank had left was his close friend Klondike, a fellow veteran who had stood by him through the toughest of times. With Klondike's help, Frank gradually settled into life in the new house. The two of them often sat together, reminiscing about their days in the military. In a touching moment, Klondike couldn't hold back his tears and expressed his deep gratitude to Frank. "Thank you for taking care of me and giving me a home. You're the only family I have left, and you saved my life. I owe you everything." They shared their dreams together. Their lives eventually took a turn for the better, especially when Frank unexpectedly became a local celebrity. Later, Klondike asked Frank to store his mysterious flash drive in the safe. It was the first time Frank had seen the device. Afterward, Klondike went out to buy cigarettes, leaving Frank alone at home. As he stepped outside, Klondike unexpectedly ran into two thugs. They demanded that he hand over the flash drive, but Klondike pretended not to understand what they were talking about. Without hesitation, one of them pointed a gun straight at his head. Keeping his cool, Klondike quickly reacted, attacking and knocking them both to the ground before walking away. Unfortunately, he was shot and killed by them. The police called Frank to identify the body. Overcome with the grief of losing his best friend, he demanded that the authorities track down those responsible for the crime. After leaving the station, Frank stepped outside to gather himself and have a drink of water. There, he unexpectedly ran into his neighbor. She offered sincere words of comfort and expressed her sympathy for his loss. During their conversation, she unexpectedly revealed that her brother had also been murdered near the spot where Klondike had met his fate, leaving Frank in shock. The woman expressed her dissatisfaction, stating that the local police had made no effort to solve serious cases like this one. Feeling uneasy, Frank shared the story with an acquaintance who worked in law enforcement. The acquaintance assured him that the police force was doing everything they could to investigate and catch the culprit. However, not long after, while watching the news, Frank discovered another murder had occurred. A white boy had been killed in town. What's notable is that the suspect in this case was immediately apprehended, which made Frank feel a sense of injustice and doubt about the police's priorities. The next day, Frank went to the police station, unable to hide his frustration over the lack of progress in Klondike's case. Once again, he received the familiar response: the officers were working tirelessly. "We're doing the best we can," but that vague promise was not enough to ease Frank's growing impatience. Finally, he realized that he couldn't just rely on the police. Determined to uncover the truth himself, Frank decided to visit the crime scene, hoping to find clues that others might have overlooked. At the scene, Frank discovered three important pieces of evidence: a bullet that had been fired, a necklace, and a pendant in the shape of a girl. Recognizing that these could be the key to unlocking the truth, he decided to start with the bullet. Frank quickly went to the only gun store in town, hoping to find out which type of gun had fired the bullet. He believed that if he could trace the origin of the bullet, he would be one step closer to finding the culprit. The advisor at the store explained that these bullets were only used in specialized weapons, typically owned by the military or Secret Service. He further confirmed that his store didn't have any such weapons in stock. However, when the shopkeeper saw the necklace that Frank had found, he immediately recognized the image of the girl on it. He revealed that she was the wife of a man named Terrence, who lived just a few blocks away from the store. He gave Frank directions to Terrence's house. When Frank arrived, a tired young woman, holding a child, answered the door. During their conversation, Frank learned that Terrence had not returned to take care of his wife and 3 children for a long time. She sadly mentioned that she hadn't seen him for weeks. The children in the house were crying, continuously asking about their father. Finally, the woman sadly revealed that recently, a friend of hers had seen Terrence at the basketball court in the area. She suggested that Frank should go there to find and talk to him. Frank immediately headed to the basketball court. Once there, he began asking the people around, hoping to discover Terrence's whereabouts. At first, the people at the basketball court refused to give Frank any information. However, when he changed his approach, becoming more firm and decisive, they finally agreed to reveal something. They mentioned a person named Ronaldo, who might know something, and gave Frank an address nearby. Frank quickly headed to the location they had indicated. There, he encountered a stranger dressed as a priest. However, the situation became awkward when one of Ronaldo's neighbors mistook Frank for a thief and raised an alarm. After hearing the truth from the neighbor, Frank learned that Ronaldo often visited a bar every morning. The neighbor also provided him with the address of the bar. But when he returned home, he happened to witness a sad scene. In front of his house, a young couple was having a loud argument. The dispute ended when the man angrily stormed off, leaving his wife Amber and son Martin standing silently, watching him leave. Frank invited the woman to his home to tend to the wounds on her face caused by her abusive husband. After taking care of her, the three of them had a warm conversation and enjoyed a peaceful evening together. The next morning, Frank continued his search for clues about Ronaldo at the bar. When he reached the first floor, he was recognized by the crowd, and their attitude was far from friendly. Without hesitation, Frank demonstrated his fighting skills to push through, and eventually, he made it to the second floor, where Ronaldo was. When Frank asked about Terrence, Ronaldo pulled out a knife and declared that he wouldn't reveal anything to Frank. However, after Frank knocked Ronaldo out the window, he quickly surrendered. Ronaldo eventually revealed that Terrence had met a girl who worked at a massage parlor nearby. Satisfied with this information, Frank headed home. However, on his way back, he ran into his police friend. The friend informed him that rumors about Frank's investigation had spread throughout the city, and even the chief of police had almost ordered his arrest. However, thanks to the timely intervention of the officers, Frank was able to avoid that bad situation. In the end, Frank replied that he couldn't stand by and watch the police remain indifferent to the death of his best friend. The police responded, stating that this was none of Frank's business, and that if he kept interfering, they would no longer assist him. But Frank responded firmly, "I don't want your help." When Frank entered the house, he immediately noticed that everything inside had been destroyed. Before he could examine further, a tall man suddenly grabbed him from behind. The stranger demanded that he hand over the flash drive, but Frank pretended not to understand, acting as if he had no idea what the man was talking about. In the blink of an eye, Frank quickly reacted, throwing the intruder out the window, causing him to fall to the ground. Next, Frank went to see his neighbor Martin, asked for help in checking the contents of the flash drive that Klondike had given him. Inside, there was a town map, some building permits, and a contact list. Frank couldn't understand why his friend was involved with these documents, but when he saw a strange nickname, Black Panther, he suddenly remembered something. Frank then went to the Asian massage parlor that Ronaldo had mentioned and made an appointment with Tatiana. She seemed surprised and wanted to know why he requested to meet with her. Frank explained that he was looking for Terrence. Tatiana appeared nervous, and after finishing her shift, she hurriedly left. As soon as Frank arrived at her house to look for more clues, he decided to climb through the window. However, just as he was about to enter, a neighbor spotted him. The neighbor initially didn't believe Frank's story when he claimed to be Tatiana's boyfriend. He asked Frank to come closer for verification, but as soon as he realized Frank was the cool guy he had seen on TV, his attitude immediately changed. "I'm a big fan of yours," he excitedly said. Not only did he let Frank go, but he also hinted that the back door of Tatiana's house was actually unlocked. Frank quietly entered the house and made his way upstairs. There, he was shocked to find Tatiana and Terrence lying in bed together. Terrence pulled out a gun and shot at Frank, but Frank quickly knocked him down and dragged him into the kitchen, where Frank shoved Terrence's hand in the garbage disposal, forcing him to reveal the truth about Klondike's death. Terrence screamed in pain and, unable to endure any longer, finally gave in. He confessed that Klondike had been killed by Sebastian, his associate, and that they were both just following orders from someone else. At first, Terrence refused to reveal who was behind the orders. However, after a round of interrogation, he was finally forced to disclose the name Black Panther and the location of this person. When Frank returned home, he once again encountered the neighbor couple arguing, but this time, the husband was more aggressive than ever. Unable to ignore it, Frank intervened, demanding that he leave Amber alone. In his rage, the husband began accusing his wife of having an affair with Frank. Frank quickly restrained the husband, twisting his arm before kicking him out of the house. Amber, grateful for the help, hugged Frank and remarked that he looked very tired. She suggested he take a rest and then come have dinner with her, as her son Martin would be spending the night at a friend's house. Although he didn't have much time to rest, Frank couldn't hide his excitement. He spent most of the afternoon preparing carefully for the dinner, picking out his sharpest suit and buying a bouquet of fresh flowers to give her. Amber couldn't take her eyes off Frank's polished, captivating appearance in his new suit. The two of them enjoyed a lavish dinner in the garden, surrounded by the scent of flowers, creating an atmosphere that was both cozy and romantic. Frank appeared pleased with the meal he had prepared himself, and Amber smiled, saying she was glad to finally have the chance to cook for someone who truly appreciated it. In a private moment, Amber confided in Frank, telling him that when she married, her husband was a completely different person, but now, he had changed forever and was no longer the man she had once loved. The two of them then enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and shared an intimate conversation. Just as the moment for their first kiss was about to arrive, unexpectedly, Martin came home early because his friend had been punished, and their sleepover plans were cancelled. Although the romantic moment was interrupted, Frank and Amber weren't discouraged. They spent a fun, cozy evening together with Martin. At the end of the night, Frank suggested that Amber and her son stay at his house since their front door hadn't been repaired yet. Finally, Frank decided to meet his trusted police friend to hand over the flash drive. He explained that the information on the drive was directly related to Klondike's death and asked his friend to take care of his dog if something bad happened to him. After that, Frank went to the church, where he sought out a priest to confess. With a heavy expression, he admitted that he was about to commit a serious act, a sin that he knew there would be no turning back from. That night, Frank went to the warehouse that Terrence had mentioned. The thug standing guard outside immediately stopped him, refusing to let him in. However, when Panther the leader heard the familiar voice, he stepped out from the shadows, his cold gaze fixed on Frank. Panther didn't hesitate to directly tell Frank that Klondike had paid the price for daring to steal something incredibly important to him. Panther demanded that Frank hand over the flash drive immediately. When Frank pretended not to know anything about the flash drive, the thugs immediately tied him up and strapped him into the electric chair. But Frank was no longer afraid of the torture. He had endured unimaginable pain before, and those experiences had forged his resilience. Frank remained silent, refusing to reveal anything. His determination made Panther lose his patience. He ordered his men to continue handling Frank and left. Before leaving, Panther revealed one piece of information they knew about Amber, the woman Frank cared about. He decided to go after her, forcing Frank to pay the price. What Panther didn't anticipate was that Frank had prepared in advance. In his pocket, he had a matchbox and a bold plan. A loud explosion rang out, shaking the warehouse and creating an opportunity for Frank to break free. Seizing the moment, Frank rushed at Panther, who now had no way to escape as his car had been destroyed. The two clashed in a fierce confrontation. During the struggle, Panther spotted a weapon on the floor and tried to use it to injure Frank. Panther quickly hijacked a bus, kicked the driver out, and slammed on the gas to flee. Frank saw this and immediately jumped onto another bus. The driver, recognizing who Frank was, reluctantly gave up the vehicle. The tense chase began. Frank caught up with Panther, but the thug cleverly found a way to escape the trap. Meanwhile, the criminal taunted Frank, claiming that he could never catch him. In the end, Frank took a daring risk, swerving and crashing straight into Panther's bus, flipping his vehicle over. Panther's vehicle crashed into an oncoming train, and miraculously, both of them survived. However, Panther didn't stop. He quickly fled, while Frank, despite limping, kept chasing him. Along the way, Frank encountered the bald-headed men who had once been the ones he made famous. They hated Frank, believing he had turned them into a joke, and now, they were out for revenge. They even planned to shoot a new video in which they would be the victorious ones. However, things didn't go as they had planned. While Panther had broken into the house and confronted Amber with a knife, he didn't have a chance to attack her when Frank suddenly appeared at the door and shoved Panther into the wall. The fight quickly spilled outside, where Frank was knocked to the ground. As Panther prepared to strike him, Amber didn't hesitate to jump on his back, giving Frank the chance to get up and continue fighting. In the end, Frank defeated Panther, and the neighbors couldn't help but applaud him. Amber stepped forward, gently asking if she could tend to his wounds, just as he had cared for hers. The next day, the local news aired a shocking story: the villain strikes back. However, this time, Frank didn't just take on the skinhead gang but also exposed one of the town's largest corruption scandals, implicating Mayor Williams and one of the country's most dangerous criminal organizations. Thanks to his heroic actions, Frank was awarded the title of honorary police officer. Now, he, Amber, and Martin are happily living together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.